Just 2 more minutes. Oops, I'm so sorry, I got lost again. But you know what just happened is not random. Psychologists actually have a name for what just happened, and they call it as mind wandering. That's what happens when you lose focus from something you intend to do, even though your body keeps going, just like you saw right now. In a research published in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, scientists reported during repetitive or low demand tasks, our attention shifts into autopilot without our conscious awareness. So basically, your brain stops monitoring what you are doing and your thoughts start drifting off. And this is the exact same mechanism which is at work when an endless, unpredictable feed loops you in. And suddenly, it's 20, 30, 40 minutes before you even realize. Now let's do a quick, honest audit. How many of you have had this tiny little free movement where your thumb started scrolling without you even realizing? Maybe you were traveling in a metro, maybe you were in between the tasks, and that happened with you. And I'll back this up with data. So as you can see, this report is according to Pew Research Center, and 31% of adults reported that they're almost constantly online. Another 48% of people reported that they check their phone several times a day without a specific reason. And this itself makes around 85%. And I think this also explains why we think, okay, let me just check that one thing, and then we forget what that one thing was. Let us see some more data. This is the daily time spent using social media. Worldwide data is 2 hours 23 minutes per day. And this is according to Data Reportal 2024. And this happens in small, unplanned sessions without any intentional use. So my question again is, there is one more question, that how many of you genuinely feel better, more connected, more inspired, more at peace when you close the app? I see many of the hands went down. This gap between what we expect to feel and what we actually feel is what I want to talk about. Because this does not just happen randomly. It happens in very specific situations. Like I'll talk about me. It usually happens at night. When my body is tired, I want to sleep, but of course, my mind loves me, and it says, Meemansha, this is the perfect time for overthinking. And suddenly, I'm reminded of the most awkward conversation I had around like 3 years ago, and maybe that one message which I shouldn't have sent. Basically, my entire life timeline. And what do I decide at that time? Okay, let me just find that one music which will help me sleep. And trust me, that's my intention. But somewhere between unlocking my phone and finding that one song, time passes. One reel leads to another. And when I finally look up, 40 minutes, 50 minutes are already gone. And I'm not even sleepy anymore. I'm more awake than before. What struck me out about this was, I do not remember deciding to stay there. So why does this happen? But before we move on to why, what is this? This is actually a pattern which is well recognized, because this is not something rare. It is not something which just happened with me. It is something very common, and this pattern is known as doom scrolling. Doom scrolling is not about replying to messages. It is not about briefly checking your phones. It is an act of endlessly consuming digital content without any intention, without a clear endpoint. Long after it stops being useful or even enjoyable. This behavior looks very small, but psychologically it shows loss of intention. So why does this happen? The question is why. But before that, let's see some other data. This is Indian data. So as per data reporter 2025, an average Indian spends around 2 hours 28 minutes on social media per day. Now, why does this happen? Coming back to the question, the answer is not the lack of willpower, it's dopamine. We usually know dopamine as the pleasure chemical, but that's not quite accurate because it's actually the seeking chemical. Why? Because it does not get released when we get a reward, it gets released when we anticipate one. It's the feeling of what's next. So with every scroll, our brain is actually trying to fulfill some unmet psychological needs. And what those needs are, according to American Psychological Association, APA, there can be 3 needs, which are, first is basically validation, the feel to be seen, to be valued, and these days it's mostly in the form of comments, views, likes. Second one is belongingness, the fear of missing out, which you basically feel when you see reels where people are getting married, whenever you open an app, someone is getting married these days, and then you have this fear of missing out on life. And third reason is novelty, because our brain is sensitive to new content, because our reward pathways gets activated when it consumes new information. That's why it's so hard to resist new content. So now, what's the solution? If these behaviors are driven by unmet psychological needs, then the solution is not to fight it, but to meet those needs intentionally. Again, according to APA, American Psychological Association, when people keep a track of what and why they are using their phone for, their intentional use increases and obsessive scrolling decreases just within 2 weeks of practice. But how can we solve this problem? The first step is awareness. Awareness not in the abstract way, but next time you reach your phone to do something, ask yourself one thing. What am I actually seeking right now? And if the answer to that question is validation, then research on human belonging shows that real connections fulfill that need far more effectively than any amount of likes or comments ever can. So instead of seeking that thing on different social media apps, just text your friend, can we meet? So try to do real-time meetings with your friends, real-time interactions that will fulfill that need more effectively. If the answer to that question is belongingness, the fear of missing out, just call your fear out, because that will reduce the emotional reactivity. And if it's novelty, your brain is just bored, then according to a research highlighted by Harvard Health, you just need to understand one thing, that it does not have to be digital. You just have to make very small physical shifts. Just getting up from your bed or just changing the room, changing your attention, sensory input, and this will help reset your attention in the most effective way possible. But sometimes we are not seeking anything. We are actually escaping some uncomfortable emotions. Maybe we are going through a tough time, we are overthinking, we are stressed, and at that time we have this urge to just scroll. So what to do at that time? So again, according to American Psychological Association, the most effective way to deal with this urge is urge surfing. What is urge surfing? It is about delaying. It's not about suppression. It is just like, telling your mind, just wait for 5 more minutes and then I'll scroll. So this way you're giving your thinking brain time to come back online. And this works because urges don't last forever. They rise, they peak, and they fall. That's why this is one of the most effective techniques. So when you start making these small shifts, you can actually measure the outcomes. And how we can prove that? Let's see one of this research studies which was published on this. So this research was published in JAMA Network Open, where many young adults reduce their unintentional use of social media for just 1 week. And what they could see was a decrease in symptoms. 16% less anxiety, 25% less depression, and 14% less insomnia, just within 1 week. So next time you caught yourself in the moment that, oops, I got lost again, don't consider it as failure. Consider it as the first step, which is awareness, because awareness is where control begins. Thank you.